This has just turned up. This is a new wildlife lens from Sony. It's a 200 to 600 zoom, f5.6 to 6.3. And what I already like best about this lens is that the zoom doesn't cause the lens to telescope. Here's the lens hood. So Sony have kindly sent me this lens early so I can go test it out. And they've also given me a budget to go and do something awesome with it. Now what I have in mind to test this is going to really push it to the limits, I think. It's a very fast moving subject, which is going to be very hard to track and focus on. Let's see if this lens is up to it. So I'm now in a hide, looking out over a pond that has fish in, and hopefully an osprey is going to fly over, spot a fish, swoop down, grab it, and then fly off with it. And I'm going to be in the perfect position to hopefully capture that on camera. So these ospreys are incredible animals. They were actually extinct in the UK in the 1900s, I think, and then the first pair returned about more than 50 years ago now and nested in Scotland, and since then the numbers have grown to over 200 nesting pairs today. So they're doing really well, and this is one of their strongholds here in the Cairngorms. But they're only here in the UK for 5 months of the year. They actually spend the majority of their time in Africa, usually in places like Senegal in West Africa. And incredibly, these birds can find their way there. Even a chick that's never been there before can get there on its own. And nobody really understands how that's done. It's quite an amazing inbuilt intuition, instinct they've got that gets them there. So this is a hide where I've been sat since 4:30 this morning, waiting for an osprey to show up, and I've been lucky. On a couple of occasions an osprey has managed to catch a fish and fly off with it, and both times I was able to respond quick enough, get the camera focused, locked onto the subject, and get some shots as it flew off with a fish in its talons. And they've come in very quickly with very little notice. They've flown over the top into this pond in front of me. They do this spectacular dive into the water, grab the fish and then fly off with it if they're successful. So it's been pretty gloomy, miserable really. My feet are freezing. And that's presented challenges for the camera, of course. I've had to shoot at ISO 25,600, so I'm expecting my images to be pretty noisy. But it hasn't really been a problem for the lens and the focus. I've found I've still been able to focus quickly on my subject, and that the camera and lens have had no problem maintaining focus and tracking it, even with a very messy background. I found the zoom really useful actually. So I'm more used to photographing with prime lenses, but with the zoom I've been able to start zoomed out, and then once I've got the bird in frame and focused, I've been able to then zoom into frame fill with 600mm. I've been shooting, as I said, a very high ISO, about 25,600, and I wanted to keep the bird nice and sharp, and so I've been using a fast shutter speed of about 2,000th of a second, and then I've been shooting wide open for this lens, which is 6.3 at 600mm. The really nice lightweight combination of the A9 and this lens has meant hand-holding hasn't been a problem at all. I've been able to hand-hold for long periods without getting tired, and that's enabled me to be really nice and nimble, and it's much easier, I find, to track fast-moving subjects when it's not locked and pinned to a tripod, and so I've been able to get a nice wide range of motion and quickly respond when the bird does appear and fly off. Right, well, I've been looking forward to a hot mug of coffee and a Scottish breakfast for a long time now, so I'm going to get going and have a look at those photos on the computer. That's better. Right, photos have copied. Okay, let's see what we got. Okay, as to be expected at ISO 25,600, there's a fair bit of noise in these photos, but it looks like they are all in focus and sharp. It certainly seems the autofocus and the lens did its job. Right, I'm going to show you every photo in this sequence. I'm not going to skip a single one, so you can see just how well this camera and lens combination has tracked the subject. Occasionally he just goes out of frame where I couldn't quite keep up with him, and as I flick through it looks like they are all sharp. It's really impressive actually. The tracking, even when it's moved well away from the center, which is where I had my focus point selected, it's kept tracking it, and these are all in focus. Shooting at 20 frames a second, so a lot of photos as well. Look at those talons digging into that fish. Wow, not a good day for that fish. What a spectacular animal. So, moment of truth. Would I recommend this lens? Well, my fears about the focus performance, they were well and truly dispelled. The focus performance was really excellent. Likewise, the build quality, the handling, the balance of the lens were all fantastic. Seems to be very sharp from what I've seen. But for me, the only problem is that maximum aperture of f6.3. In a lot of my projects I would prefer a fast telephoto prime like the 400 f2.8 or the 600 f4, because I often like to use those wider apertures in low light, or to get that very shallow depth of field that allows me to isolate my subject, particularly from messy backgrounds. I'd have liked to have seen this lens be f5 or f5.6 through the entire zoom range, but I do understand why Sony has made that trade-off with weight, to keep the weight of the lens down, and also to keep the expense of the lens down. There's definitely going to be situations where I need to be light, but still need that reach. For example, if I'm doing an expedition where maybe I'm carrying everything on my back and trekking, then a nice compact lightweight option like this is going to be invaluable. Also, when I need the flexibility of that zoom and that useful range between 200 and 600, which is often what I need for wildlife, then this is a really good option to have. And so I think I would get this lens for those two sort of situations. That's all I have time for in this field test. It's time for me to head home. But if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to sharing more field tests and behind the scenes footage with you in the future.